Okay, we are now recording. Are there any questions regarding assignments, group work?
I have a question about the movie from last night. So I can watch the Mockingbird movie. Can I still answer the questions for that movie? Like the questions that you have posted, I can still answer those questions.
Okay, so part of it is, I do want the extra credit as far as people attending. So that's kind of part of it, just to make sure that we're kind of putting in a little extra time. So yeah, watching the movie with the rest of the class and then answering the questions. So that's kind of like a package deal, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And I'll have additional opportunities for extra credit. It may not necessarily be the movie. Like we have a podcast that was 2 weeks ago by Dr. Chang. I think he has another one coming up in November. I haven't gotten the details on it yet, but as soon as I do, I'll send that out. So that would be another opportunity for extra credit as well. So yeah, keep your keep a lookout because like I said, I'll be offering different opportunities. Okay. Any other questions?
I do have a quick question.
Yep. Go ahead.
So for our project, does our argument need to be one big paragraph, or can it be multiple paragraphs that each have like a title at the top of them to like separate them, like just like to split up the sections?
So what do you mean by argument?
So like there's like a part of our assignment where it says like our argument, or like explaining, like I guess like I don't know how to explain it. It's like it's just basically like whatever our assignment is on, and our argument behind like why we think like for example my group is doing like dreams and like how it is linked to trauma, that sort of thing, like the different like parts for our argument.
Okay. You mean for like the results and the conclusion? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. So what is your? So when I'm saying argument, did I use that term, argument?
I believe you did. Yes.
And that is in the actual assignment, right? For the group, you're talking about the group work.
Yes, for the group work.
Okay. Let me take a look at it. See what. So when I say argument, what I mean by argument, if I did use that, is just your position, and based on your position, your position is going to be based on what you're reading in the literature. So you should have a question. You develop your research question, yeah, and that gives you your hypothesis. So you develop a nice, strong hypothesis. This is what we are expecting to find, essentially, is what you're stating. And then you go through the research, and then you substantiate that even further by saying this group or these authors did a similar experiment in this area, and they found this results. And this kind of substantiates what we're talking about. Those are really evidence builds your argument. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the more evidence you find, the stronger your argument is. I'm not saying when you argue, going back and forth. It's not a debate. It's your argument is strengthened by what you're finding in the literature and what you're finding by research. Okay.
I gotcha.
Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Yeah, it's weird. I'm still looking to see if I use the word argument in there. I may have, but I didn't realize that would be confusing. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. All right, I'll look around and see if so you found that in the actual assignment itself. Group project discussion.
Yes, I looked up under group 4.
Rubric. Okay. Yeah, I'll have to go through and look at it. But all right. But that answered your question, all right?
Yes, thank you.
Yep. All right. Any other questions or comments or anything? How many of you watched the debate last night?
I didn't watch the entire debate, but I watched like the key points somewhere else.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't nearly as entertaining as the first one, right? It was refreshing to see that they're a little bit more civilized this time, and they certainly hit on their key points. That's kind of how I felt with the first one that I saw, the first debate that they had. Nothing really nothing was talked about. There was really, speaking of arguments, they didn't have anything to really substantiate what their positions were. So this one was a little bit more, I guess, intelligent, which is funny because we're going to be talking about intelligence today. So anyway, all right. So what we're going to be talking about today is finishing up our discussion on cognition. So when we left, what was it? I think Monday, we were talking about different ways that the mind develops, and in that when we're faced with the problem, we're able to solve them, right? And we can either do that through top-down processing or bottom-up processing, or just trying to use previous experiences to come up with creative ways or true and trite ways of getting our goals met. All right. And there's a lot that go into setting goals and meeting goals. And one of them, and I think we brought this up in our class, is the level of effort that you put into something really depends on how badly the individual wants that to meet their goal or obtain something, right? And we'll talk about that when we get into motivation. I don't think it's next week, but the week after, because motivation is a big part of that. So the greater we want something, the more likely we are to solve that. Now, how that fits into mental health when we get to that section, I think chapters 12 and 13, is, again, how badly do people want to meet their goals? A lot of people that come to my office and sit in the therapy chair and they talk to me about their problems, usually they're motivated to fixing something. They don't like the discomfort in having anxiety, because as we know, when your sympathetic nervous system kicks in, heart rate goes up, we start sweating, we get tense, we get tension headaches, and things are uncomfortable for us, and we don't want to feel uncomfortable. It's not healthy for us either. So in that respect, people tend to be motivated to come in to see therapists to get help. Now, there are situations where they may not be motivated. And we see this. I also do a little bit of work, or I used to do a lot of work with drug and alcohol, not so much these days, but drug and alcohol is a big problem. Why is motivation to get help a big problem with drug and alcohol? Anybody guess? Any guesses as to why addiction is hard to be motivated, have somebody motivated to treat?
Well, I know people feel ashamed of it a lot of the times.
Okay. So it might be a little bit of it might be a wounded pride issue, right? More often than not with drug and alcohol, and any of you that are going into the field, you'll find more often than not that people that are faced with addiction don't want help. Or if they're going to help, it's not because they want it, it's because they're being forced to. Usually the one of the telltale signs of addiction is legal problems. So either somebody, they got a DUI, or they got in a fight while they were drinking, or they injured somebody, or something happened that they now have to go to treatment. And most of the time, I'm not going to say all the time, most of the time, they don't even want to be there. So their motivation is really low to fix themselves. Sometimes, okay. Like I said, not a blanket statement, because I have helped a lot of people that wanted to be helped and their goal was high. But one of the other things that we look at with mental health is their ability to solve problems. Okay. And we talked a lot about that on Monday. But another factor that goes into problem solving is their ability to solve their problems. So we look at a thing called intelligence, right? So I'm going to share my screen with you, but while I'm setting that up, what are some definitions? Maybe you have a personal definition as to what you think intelligence is. What is intelligence? Anybody? Doesn't have to be a book definition. What do you think
Anything that
intelligence?
you've like learned throughout, like everything that you've learned throughout the years, whether it be like from school or like from like life lessons and everything.
Okay, life lessons and learning. Okay, the more life lessons you have, the probably the greater intelligence.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Anybody else? What are some ideas you have about intelligence? What defines intelligence for you? All sleeping today, huh? It's Friday. I'm asking too much.
How much a person can understand, like not much how much they know, but like what they understand.
Okay, so how much they understand. Okay. Okay. Anything else? All right. So I'll give you the book answer. So the book answer is the ability to learn, which we talked about, okay, from experience, life lessons, we can call it that. Okay, so good job. Acquire knowledge. And adapt. Okay, so how they understand, that's kind of acquiring knowledge, right? So you have to be able to understand something in order to really demonstrate it sometimes, right? But adaptability. Adaptability is a huge one. And I'm going to present you with a couple different theories of intelligence because we're still figuring out what intelligence is exactly. I mean, we know, and this is kind of why I asked you what your meaning is, because just because the book has a definition, intelligence really, it's a broad concept. So when we think of intelligence, we generally look at the ability to learn from past experience and adapt, yeah, that's an A, adapt to one's environment. All right, makes sense, right? So why is that important? Because if we can't learn from our past experiences and we can't adapt to our environment, what do you think that does to our survival rate, a person's survival rate, if they don't learn their lessons?
It decreases. They'd have
Right.
like less likely to survive in certain
Right.
areas.
Exactly. So as an example, if you think back to the caveman days, the primitive days, when if a and go back to learning even, but if we have a person that knows that there's a tiger den nearby, do you think that they need to adapt to that environment and probably steer clear of that? Because if not, they're probably going to be lunch. So being able to adapt to the environment is a good sign. It's a good, well-rounded definition of intelligence. So what happened around the turn of the century, about 1900s, is we started to see an influx, a lot of immigration come in from overseas. And prior to that, our school systems were generally pretty programmatic. They had a very set way of doing things, and most of the school age children conformed to those standards. So what came about in the 1900s during this mass period of immigration, is these school systems were no longer appropriate. They're teaching one style and one method, and children that came from different cultures weren't really adapting to those methods very well. So it was very, very difficult. So along came a man named Charles Spearman, and Charles Spearman tried to figure out a way to get students to kind of conform and be able to weed out whether they're going to be good in one environment versus another. So they had different schools teaching different classes, teaching different things, different age groups. And Spearman wanted to figure out a way to label, really, is what he did, is label children as either being bright or dull. And those are unfortunately are the terms that he used. So he developed the idea of the G factor theory. All right. And essentially what he says is based on all of a child's specific intelligence, you can lump that together to come up with a G factor, or like a well-rounded intelligence concept, or explanation for them. So he looked at different S factors. So the G factor kind of branches off and looks at different abilities. And Gardner kind of furthered these a little bit, because initially Spearman came up with about 6 or 7 abilities, but Gardner expanded that out to verbal. I don't know if I'm gonna have room to write all these. Music, logic, or math, visual and spatial, movement, interpersonal, intrapersonal, I'll just put intrapersonal, naturalist, sorry about that, and existentialist. Existential, sorry. So these are the S factors, okay? And based on, it could be any one of these, but if we have one, like a student or a child that excels in maybe like music, you know, who would you consider to be a musical genius? Anybody that you know? Anybody from history?
Ray Charles.
Ray Charles, okay, yeah. What made him so intelligent when it came to music?
For the fact that he was blind, he still like understood, like when he's playing the piano, he understood it, like where the keys was at and stuff like that. And he, he could sing well. He was a singer, so
Yeah.
Yeah,
he was very musical, right? He had a musical talent about him. Yo-Yo Ma, for anybody that's not a rapper, Yo-Yo Ma is a cellist, and he was, I think he was 7 years old when he played for the president, John F. Kennedy, I believe. So at 7 years old, he's playing for a U.S. president. That's pretty good, right? But he understood music when he understood music before he was able to even talk. So Mozart, he's another example. And we kind of see that we can call them a high level of intelligence on these factors. Now, maybe he's not good at math. We don't know. I don't know if Ray Charles is good at math or not. Maybe he's not very charismatic, right? He wasn't really, from what I know of him, he wasn't really an athlete, but we do have athletes that we would consider genius. So in some way, even though that they might rate low on one of these other ones, we would still consider that person intelligent. Like interpersonal, when I see interpersonal intelligence, I think of people like Oprah. She's very charismatic, so her verbal is probably high, and interpersonal. So Gandhi would be an example of existential, right? And naturalist. So anyway, we can look at any one of these factors and consider that person to be genius in their own way, right? So this is just one of the theories. Another theory that was put out there was Sternberg's triarchic theory. And so Sternberg, although he appreciated that those 9 factors were probably great at explaining intelligence on different scales, it didn't really answer the question, are they adaptable? Are they adaptable to their environments? So he looked at 3 areas. He considered all 9 of the specialized, the S factors, but he also theorized that in order to gauge intelligence, some kind of ability does need to be present, but when it relates to their environment, they have to be analytical and practical and creative. So analytical, are they able to break the problem into components? All right. If we have a goal or a problem, how do we solve that? And if you think about in terms of mental health, and we'll talk about this in mental health, people that tend to suffer from mental health disorders usually have a difficult time analyzing and solving their own problems, right? They can't break out of certain mindsets or maybe even certain habits of doing things certain ways. So analytical is very important because it helps them to break down the problem. The creative side is looking at new ways of dealing with it. Okay, so if something doesn't work, it's great to have this analytical part. But if we're over here in creativity, and we're not able to, analyze the problem, it's great to be creative, but we're still not solving the problem. And the other component is practical. Does it work? Is it going to work? All right. So again, we may have some great ideas, but if it's not going to work, we're not solving our problem. Therefore, the analysis. So what Sternberg posited is somewhere in the middle is where we want to exist. And the more well-balanced a person is, the higher analytical, practical, and creative skills that they have combined really defines intelligence. Okay. So how do we measure intelligence? What are some ways? What is the scale like for measuring intelligence? Does anybody know? Is there a scale? Like tornadoes have F1 through F5. What scale do we use for measuring intelligence?
Is it the IQ test?
Or like the IQ.
IQ, exactly. IQ. What does IQ stand for? I'll give you a hint. Just shout it out if you know it. Oh, you're awesome. Quotient. There we go. Intelligence quotient, or IQ. So our IQ is really what we look at for assessing whether or not we're going to be able to be adaptable and solve problems. And we look at that at a really young age, especially with children, right? So IQ in the beginning, initially it was it's a quotient because they initially used it as a division problem. So IQ equals mental age divided by current age multiplied by 100. All right, so let's kind of walk through this. So right around the turn of the century, when they were trying to assess children to figure out whether they were indeed bright or indeed dull, they were matching. They knew their physical age, their current age. So let's say Billy. We're assessing Billy. Billy comes in and he is 10 years old. We know that. That's his current age. We give him some tasks to check his math abilities, check out his visual spatial abilities, maybe his verbal processing speed. And we find that little Billy is probably around the percentile, natural percentile of what an 8-year-old would be. So he's matching the abilities that around 8 years old, that's what they're doing. Okay. So what we're doing is we're taking his mental age based on his score divided by 10, his age, and we get 0.8 times 8. So his IQ would be 80. All right. Pretty straightforward. Likewise, let's say little Billy comes in. Let's use somebody else. Let's say Susie comes in. And Susie is rather advanced. She's doing math problems that 12-year-olds are doing. We'll say she's the exact same age. So if she's doing problems that 12-year-olds are doing, we're going to assess her at being at a mental age of 12, right? Which gives us 1.20 times 100 equals, give her an IQ of 120. Now that probably doesn't tell you a whole lot, does it? because we really have to compare it. And I did download the scale here just to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at with, we consider 100 exactly average. All right. So a 10-year-old that measures, a 10-year-old with a mental age of 10 is at 100. That's normal. That's normal for us. So we consider that normal. 100 is average or normal. So if you have a 100 point IQ score, then that means that you're exactly where you should be for your age. If you have a 120, like Susie did, you know, we're looking at probably almost in the gifted range. We consider 130 to be gifted. Opposite of that, you know, Billy, he was what do we say he was? 80, right? So he's probably a little on the low range, but we consider 70 to be to demonstrate some kind of developmental or cognitive delay. All right. So anything below that, and we're looking at probably some significant impairment of some sort. But again, we look at it in terms of adaptability. Are they able to solve their own problems? Anything below 70, we might have some life skill issues. The individual might not be able to survive on their own. They might need assisted living of some sort. Because if they do, like say there's a fire in the kitchen, are they going to be able to extinguish that fire and get to safety? That might come to question if we have IQs below 70, right? Excuse me. All right, so any questions on IQ and how we measure them? All right, so I'm not going to go, I know your book talks about different tests. The two tests that we use to measure, and intelligence really has evolved as far as our way of measuring it and scoring it, have evolved a lot differently than what I showed you with the intelligence quotient. That mental age versus current age is no longer really the formula that we use. So we use different tools. The two that we still use today are the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for children and Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale. So I'll just abbreviate those, WACE and WISC. So chances are many of you have probably taken some form of these. Well, most people have taken an intelligence test of some sort. And the other one is the Stanford Binet. They're both very similar. They both measure really the Stanford Binet. They both measure, they're reliable at looking at similarities, seeing if there's if people are able to make logical, analytical connections. They look to evaluate a person's vocabulary or information that they may have learned through schools. It also measures their perceptual reading and their processing speed. So how quickly can they manipulate numbers in their head? Now, these are for measuring intelligence, okay? These two. How many of you have taken an SAT or ACT or something like that? Has anybody taken one?
I have.
I have.
Most people have, okay? Now, those don't necessarily measure intelligence. Why not? Why don't they measure intelligence? What's the component that they're missing out of really intelligence? Do they really check adaptability? Do they check to see if you're able to adapt to new situations?
No.
No, it's pretty much just do you know your language and then the math and stuff.
Right, aptitude, which is still important, okay? Especially with getting into college, right? And the reason that they may have a SAT score requirement, they want to make sure that you know enough, that not necessarily can you learn it, but have you learned it already? What they don't want students doing is getting into colleges that they're really ill prepared for, and it really sets them up for failure. And while the college might get money, it doesn't help them at all if you don't continue to show up and go to school and give them more money. So it's really a way of weeding out people. Now, can you do better on an SAT score? Like if you take the SATs once, can you get a better score next time?
Yes.
Absolutely, right? And it really depends on how well you study. Some people might pick up information a little bit more. That's a sign of intelligence. If they're able to pick up, learn things a little bit better, they have a higher intelligence for that. They're probably going to learn it quicker. Whereas somebody might need to study a little bit longer or absorb it differently, maybe do books on tape or audiobooks. But in any case, aptitude really can waver. It can go up, it can go down. Intelligence, in contrast, really stays stable for the duration of a person's life. Okay. So a child that scores really high as an adult will also probably score really high if they took an intelligence test again. So intelligence remains relatively stable over time, unless something happens, like if there's an injury or some kind of brain disease or something like that, where they lose some kind of cognitive function, then we'll see intelligence change. But rarely does it ever increase significantly. Okay. They might be able to do a little bit better on practicing, like, for example, processing speed or problem solving or something like that. We might see it jump up a couple of points, but if a child gets a 90 on an 90 IQ score as an adult, it's probably going to be right around 90, probably no more than 100. Okay. All right, and we do know that intelligence is a correlation to, or is correlated to success later on in life. Okay, so usually the higher the intelligence, the more successful the person might tend to be, and that could be however you want to measure success. It could be happiness, it could be overall quality of life, or it could even be money. Some people might consider money to be successful. All right. All right, any questions or comments on intelligence? All right. Any questions in general? All right, if there's nothing else, I'm going to cut it short today because I think a couple of you had to speak with me. So if you need to speak with me, go ahead, stay behind. Other than that, the rest of you, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Be safe, and I'll see you here on Monday.
Thank you.